part 2 this weekend, where we will be answering all of your questions related to social sciences for the next hour or so. And as I pick a nice, appropriate holiday-themed background as we continue to celebrate the holidays, I hope everybody had a really, really wonderful Christmas and are preparing for a very, very fun and enjoyable New Year. We will be doing a end of the year Q&A on Wednesday. I don't know when, but we will see. And either Sunday or Monday, we will be going live for our members only. So if you want to become a member here, a Friendly Neighborhood Historian, and join for an stream for members only, where we can go much more deeper into topics that are interesting, please sign up. Historian is cheap, and it's extremely helpful. If you want to become a Friendly Neighborhood Historian unofficially, you can like and subscribe, and that's good enough as it is. No pressure whatsoever. But if you want to join us for extra perks such as the extra videos, early releases, bonus content, and of course our live stream that we'll be doing either tomorrow or members only, please consider doing so. It's a great way to help the channel at the end of the year. Let me see here, and where are we going to go here? Thinking we'll do some sort of holiday background again, as we are still in very much the Christmas season. The lights are still pretty, and people are still drinking eggnog, enjoying the spirits, and all of that fun stuff. So let's see. Going through my photos here to find a nice, good background. Tomorrow I'm doing a live stream lecture. By the way, we do a lecture every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern, and usually you guys get to vote on it. They voted on this one a couple weeks ago, and we about the 5th U.S. President, James Monroe. So kind of a switch up from the holiday theme backgrounds. We'll be doing some backgrounds related to America's 5th President and the last founding father to really be the President of the United States. So let's see here. And we'll do this background. We've done that one before. Let's see, what else could we use? I had another one that I really liked. Where is it? Let's see here. You know what? We'll go for a Christmas Carol background. So there you see Ebenezer Scrooge. There's the Christmas tree in the background. This is some fan art or some AI design from the Christmas Carol. And if you want to actually listen to the entirety of the Christmas Carol read by yours truly, Friendly Neighborhood History, please check that out here. We have an entire playlist of me reading the Christmas Carol that came out about a year ago, so please check that out. And members get to hear me read The Gift of the Magi, and I've also read 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, so you get to listen to me read some holiday classics. You don't even have to be a member for all of them, but for some of them you do. So please like and subscribe and become a Friendly Neighborhood Historian. I hope everybody's having a really great day and a very, very happy, 5th day of Christmas to all of you. We are 5 days left, including this one, in the calendar year of 2025. It's been an incredible here where we were able to be advised and produce so much content, got on TikTok, got on Patreon, got on Substack. We did a lot this year, and it was really, really wonderful to see, and I couldn't have done it without my moderators, Hars and Harry, who are in the chat right now, or at least Hars is. Of our social medias you can check out. Excuse me. So if you have any questions, topics, comments, or issues you want to discuss related to history or social sciences, drop them in the chat and I'll be happy to answer them in a timely, friendly manner, as we do here all the time at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. And tomorrow I will be bringing back Smoking Jacket, very, very appropriate holiday, our live stream lecture on the 5th President of the United States, James Monroe, which we voted on a couple weeks ago. Good evening, Joe. Great. I had a good holiday. I hope yours was good too. Possibly your opinion of the most corrupt era of the U.S. government. Late 19th century spoils system where friends and supporters was basically expected and was the rule for many of the political parties. You had Boss Tweed. You had what's his name? Roscoe Conkling. You had party bosses basically dominating the political landscape and creating the political scenes that they wanted to, very, very openly. You had an entire wing who were basically okay with them doing what they wanted to. I forget the name of them, but presidents, this conglomerate. And it really was the 19th century that they really had to curtail that under presidents like James Garfield and Chester Arthur. But I think that was the most overwhelmingly obvious, outright corrupt era in American political history. 24-hour stream. Now that would be fun. That'd be cool. That'd be like what Hassan Piker does, and that stuff's really interesting. I'm thirst trap that he is. But that would be, I don't know how I'd do it. breaks, restroom breaks, stuff like that. I'd have to eat and stuff, but yeah, 2 hours and 10 minutes one time. That's my limit. One day I'd love to do like a literally 6 or 7 hour stream for you guys. But anyways, welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. A very happy Saturday to you, and I hope you are all enjoying your holiday and enjoying the background of Ebenezer Scrooge and a London Christmas in the 1840s. So yes, you need a dog collar. Oh geez. Um, so that would be really nice. Could you explain the societal transition from handcrafting everything in homes to purchasing more in markets in the United States? Well, this was something that an early modern European society that relied on craftsmen's and families and guilds and different smaller organizations and groups that would produce goods by hand over a period of weeks or months. And it would take quite some time for things to be available and ready for people. The Industrial Revolution allowed for mass production of goods and services, where all of a sudden, instead of a group family, like who would make shoes, literally the shoemaker family. That's where these surnames come from, like Smith and Shoemaker and stuff like, and Carpenter. They would take a while instead of weeks to design one that was ornate and beautiful, but of course very, very hard to make. The machines would make it a lot quicker and a lot more easy, and eventually the assembly line specialized the labor that was used for it. So by the beginning of the 20th century, when the assembly line was perfected by Henry Ford, all of a sudden mass production of not just regular furniture, goods, and textiles was easy, but mass production of complex machines like cars became a lot easier for people. So it kind of starts in the early 19th century in the textile revolution. Britain makes it a lot easier to produce clothing and materials for textiles, but it goes all the way into the early 20th century, with the assembly line kind of being the crescendo development. Let me see here, and guys, great to have you as a member. That's really really appreciative. You can join us for our members only live this Monday. I believe we'll do it on Monday. That'd be fun. Sunday. Tomorrow, live stream lecture. You know what? Let's just do it Sunday. We'll do a live stream here for members only of the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. But thank you so much. So Bill, who's got the emoji, Gaia, welcome to join us. Could you please do a video about the neoconservative era in American history? That'd be a great video to do. I'll have to do that at some point. My video that was delayed from yesterday, which will come out either today or tomorrow, will be about the not the Russian Revolution. It'll be my last Supreme Court history video. Then my video on Monday is about the Russian Revolution, as I resume my Russian history series. And I've got tons of videos on Russian history and an entire series of shorts on Russian czars, long form videos ranking Russian czars and British monarchs and American presidents, so please go check that out. Can you talk about JFK tension between him and Israel before his assassination? Well, Sabir, this is what people on the internet say all the time. Kennedy was not murdered by the Israelis. There's no evidence to support that Israel had anything to do with Kennedy's death. It's much more likely the CIA might have been involved, but had some isolationist policy, didn't want to get involved in a long war in Vietnam, which was obviously, and he wasn't sure about Israel wanting or having nuclear capabilities. He was a little bit leery of Israel having that much political and military power. It's not as bad as you think. What kind of accent you've got? Ohio? You can keep guessing. I'm not going to tell you. People have told me that I sound very European or very foreign, and those are American to me, and I'm always very complimented by that. So, scary ghost stories popular for Christmas entertainment. I think it's the winter months, the dark, cold, occluded nights, and things like that. And of course, the Christmas Carol has probably set the motif for Christmas redemption arcs. The Grinch is obviously another one, but of course, the Christmas Carol includes the invention of 4 very famous Christmas ghosts, Jacob Marley and the Ghosts of Christmas Present, Past, and Future. So yes, and if you want to listen to that story read by this accent, whatever it might be, on the Neighborhood History Channel. Have you heard when Jesus cured the lepers and also humans who was blind, then Jesus Christ was passed away and returned to life? Isn't that just Christianity? Let me see here. Sure. Then. Yeah, I always use Eastern Time. What's your thoughts about Israel behind Epstein blackmail? It's not. Is it possible that Jeffrey Epstein was a member of Mossad or one of these agencies? Yeah, it's perfectly possible. I just love how that immediately just invalidates Israel or invalidates this or that about Israel. So, or means that everyone in Mossad is Israel is evil and the United States is evil for supporting Israel. I mean, when you say scary Christmas stories, I think of Nightmares Before Xmas. Yeah, great movie, great movie. So, anyways, other questions about history or social studies. Why is the U.S. Grant administration known for its corruption? Grant himself, in fact, he personally went on trial to ever be a witness at a trial. People who were corrupt in his administration. Grant just didn't have wasn't the best judge. He in this kind of spoil systems I was talking about earlier. He appointed people who were politically for him and politically friendly towards him, and he would reward them with high-ranking positions in the government, and they often tended to be corrupt, giving kickbacks and projects to their political enemies, and this led to a lot of corruption during his presidency. But Grant himself was never involved. The Credit Mobilier scandal or the whiskey ring or these different things that many of his associates in his administration were. But Grant is seen as a bad judge of character. Because of it, it really haynecked and his political chances during his second term and made it a lot harder for him to continue Reconstruction as the Democratic Party gained influence based off of his corruption. Let me see. Let me see here. There are too many rich people in it. I don't know what that means. Silver is king. Maybe in South America where they mined a lot of silver under the Spanish, but why transpiration not being used to keep traveling in America by that? But Trump is a Jew puppet. Candace Owens has entered the chat, everybody. Yeah. Anyways, questions about history or social studies. The Epstein files, we're never going to see them. Too many rich and powerful people in it. After that 6 months, a lot of people figured that we'll get something, we're not going to get everything. It's pretty the kind of the teasing of getting something. Trump administration might have learned the hard way that over-promising doesn't about the Epstein files at all. Would release. Oh, they released some of it rather than we were going to get all of it. Why didn't we get all of it? And now people have their conspiracies and their nonsense. Turtle Island rules the world. You mean Turtle Island is a reference that some First Nations Native American tribes who are mainly in Canada, North America, being called Turtle Island. And yes, it is a huge mug. And it says, as I suspected all along, I was right. What do you think about Republican civil war over Israel? It's a political topic. If you want me to get into politics, Sabir, although it's great to see you again, it's been a while since you've been here, give a super chat. Talk about how coffee brought about the Renaissance. I don't know if coffee had a lot to do with the Renaissance in particular. Many cash crops that are brought from the New World, and really, it's coffee. Other places around the world traded with the Africans and along the Silk Road for centuries before then, but it becomes even more and more popular and more common in Europe after the Americas, which is after the Renaissance in the 15th and 16th centuries. Can you explain why socialism didn't overshadow the mixed economy into more aspects of it we have now after the FDR policy experiment? The American economy never becomes too radicalized. So there was a lot of shifting towards deregulation and the ending military contracts for private enterprises after the war, for instance, in the 1940s. That kind of is a decentralization of the mixed economy that FDR had created. What event after the Industrial Revolution changed America the most? The freeing of the slaves. Let me see here. Eating water led to enlightenment because of heating the water associated with drinking tea and coffee is what he was referring to. Eating water? Oh, yes, I see what you mean. Who was greater, Catherine or Peter? I say Peter the Great, but both are fantastic monks. I have videos about both of them. Please go check them. I love both Catherine the Great and Peter the Great. Obviously, revolutionized Russia. Peter made power. Catherine made it a world power, bookending the beginning and the end of the 18th century. Two of the most important powers in not just Russian but European history was quite an amazing feat for the fledgling Russian Empire that really anywhere at all all when Peter took over in 1696. And by the time Catherine died a century later in 1796, it was probably the second or third, or even arguably the most dominant power in Europe. It had all the land, it had an incredible army, and it was defeating Napoleon. So yeah. Let me see here. Do you mean the steam engine is a good one part, but the steam engine is what caused the Industrial Revolution? I believe the must I bet at like a secondhand store for a couple of dollars in the genocide in Gaza. Which the thesis is that the heating water associated with heating tea and coffee that I played. Oh, that's true. So yeah, you have horrifying epidemics and outbreaks of cholera and other diseases, such as a great cholera epidemic of London. The reason I'm pointing to the background is this is a Christmas carol inspired from the mid-19th century. But the truth of the matter is that cholera was a common outbreak, was commonly outbroke in major cities and could lead to epidemics where thousands or tens of thousands of people died. The cholera epidemic of 1848 to 1852 is one of the in world history and heavily affected London. I think 50,000 people died. But yes, the ability to use coal and other heating techniques to heat water with bacteria, which led to the advent of coffee and tea. That's the Industrial Revolution. That's not something you see as much. You can become anything you want, Matthew. Yeah, let me see. You can become a great traffic engineer by building trains. There you go. We should catch. Always happy to do so, Abraham Lincoln. The weakening of the military-industrial complex could influence. I'm not saying that it weakened. I'm saying that the government contract for wartime production ended, and there was a general deregulation of the economy. Focus on consumer goods and not military goods became much more common after World War, what you call World War II, what I call World War III. And so the American economy of the 1940s and 50s became a much more consumer-heavy economy with the wealth and the wherewithal to produce goods. So the producers who were making all of these Jeeps and military equipment were now able to make cars and other goods and services. So there's an economic theory that talks about guns or butter. Are you going to focus on military output or consumer output? America during the 1950s was heavily focused on, but the government had far less to do with this in terms of involvement. So the deregulation of the economy occurs in the late 1940s and early 1950s and really takes on the Eisenhower administration. So there you go. FDR entered November 1943. Those are incorrect dates. Yes, FDR brought the war the U.S. out of the Depression. FDR would not like MAGA. Although he was definitely an American chauvinist who believed America was the greatest. He was far more socialistic in his economic and social policy of the time, and I mean, I think FDR is pretty overrated, so there's that too. Let me see here. Hey, Eric, good to see you. Have you ever looked into the case of Karen Silkwood and whether it had a long-term effect on Kerr-McGee Corporation? Never heard of either of them, so I can't speak to it. How is the Scottish Reformation different from the English one? Far more influenced by Geneva and the Calvinistic reforms of John Calvin. John Knox was huge in the creation of what became known eventually as Presbyterianism. It was really persecuted by the established Church of Scotland, which was a derivative of the Anglican Church. Catholicism remained strong in many sectors of Scottish life, particularly in the upper classes, particularly around the time of Mary Queen of Scots, but the continual rise and influence of Protestantism in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, perpetuated by people like John Knox, eventually made a stronger, more reformed version of Protestantism more predominant in Scotland than had been in England, where Knox and Reformed theology became much more a part of the story. And from here you get the Covenanters, heavily persecuted by the Church of England later on, and eventually this becomes the basis for the Presbyterian denomination. Worst president of the 19th century, Buchanan or Andrew Johnson? Two bookending, I guess I'm using that term a lot, the best president between two of the worst presidents. No, you cannot. Me, I am not a cookie, and you are not the Cookie Monster. What was the First World War? The seven. Hars, can you put the video up? Steve Bannon is not objectively pro-Trump. He's pro-burn the whole failed system down and rebuild, so Trump is a necessary tool. Agree. Calling Trump a tool is something I might be willing to agree with in a different context, but I mean, I'm not is a history channel. We're going to focus on the history and the social studies. I talk about geopolitics only when I'm looking at it from a historical lens. If you want me to go into more detail about that, Usman, you'll have to do a super chat. Yes, had suffered from polio since the early 1920s. If I'm not mistaken, the more government regulation in the 1970s when the EPA was created under Richard, and deregulation was more prevalent under Reagan. Well, yeah, there was regulation comes and goes. That's my whole point, is that the American economy never drifts towards one extreme or the other. It's always kept moderate. Compared to Europe, it's more conservative and free market. But it never, if it was mixed, if there was regulation, if there was government oversight, that was rolled back. And if there was a rollback, then eventually government oversight would come back in again. So it's kind of a cyclical economic development based off of governments that are in power. So during the 1950s, there was a period of deregulation of the economy. Then in the 1960s, this was kind of heightened by the Kennedy tax cuts of the 1960s. And then later in the 60s and 70s, there was more regulations, and these were cut into by people like Ronald Reagan. And the Environmental Protection Agency they weren't regulating for the environment during the 1940s like they were in the 1970s. What is your opinion of Keynesian economics? Keynesian economics is born out of the failures of what many people believe were the free market to properly regulate itself. That the invisible hand of Adam Smith had somehow failed to collapse of the American economy, which influenced a Great Depression around the world in the early 1930s. John Maynard Keynes already had some of these ideas, develops basically this theory called Keynesian economics, where the basic idea is government is the one that kickstarts the economy. Eventually, that will lead to the creation of jobs, the creation of wealth. If companies are bailed out by the government or given government assistance, or programs are created where government hires workers, this will lead to investment in the economy. This will lead to more money in people's hands, and this will lead to basically a kickstart for the economy. So it's a more liberal, democratic view of economic theory that kind of clashes with classical libertarian, classical liberalism. It's an interesting theory. It kind of goes back and forth, and it's the predominant economic theory of what you would call a Democrat in the United States. Duels were common originally with fencing and swordplay, but later on with pistols. And were often illegal in many different jurisdictions. That didn't stop. Anyways. It didn't stop him from doing it. Anyways. Okay, we're back. That should fix my my Wi-Fi. Let me see here. Hasn't Hayek's theories prevailed over Keynes? No, there's a continual debate between Keynesian economics. It's called the Austrian school. The Austrian school is Hayek and Milton Friedman, and it's basically the building blocks for pro-capitalist, pro-market, and there's also supply-side economics. There's different derivatives, different theories, but the predominant one is more government intervention in the economy to help the economy go, versus less government. Okay, we are back. Hopefully the Wi-Fi is working fine. Sorry about that. Where were we? Thank you for keeping them entertained. That means a lot. I really appreciate it. Let's see. Questions about history or social studies. Let's see if we can get through something without any more interruptions. I don't know, and I don't really care. Let me see. My Wi-Fi is fine. Other questions about history or social studies? I was asking jewels like rubies in the crown. Jewels in the sense of special precious gems have been used to off of their birth. That's why we have birthstones, but also to because they are so rare, obviously carry a value similar to gold or silver. Precious gems can be used as jewels in a crown to designate the power of a particular kingdom or empire. Um, so, why does Moldova exist? It's a particular province. I don't know. I'm trying to remember where it is, but it was taken from Romania. It was more anciently part of Romania. Why did the punk rock chicken cross the road? Because he was glued to the first chicken. Huh? The nuke dropped was a war crime. I don't see the sorry. I don't see the United States as a war criminal with that example. There are other times when the United States, like any other country, um, committed a war crime, but not at Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Um, so, how did you do on the history section of the graduate record exam? The other section, I didn't take it. Um, Thank you, James. I say what my opinion, and you just simply repeat what you said already. I am not wrong. Please explain to me how I am wrong. So, by what point did we go tins of water to plastic water bottles? Plastic is a derivative of of materials that are used in fossil fuels. So they become more readily produced in the 20th century, and they are very durable and very easy to use, and they are, of course, recyclable. And so you can use them um, and use them to produce mass. They're easily mass produced. They're easily usable, and so you obviously use them to produce water bottles and stuff like that. Uh, yes. Let me see here. Okay, Keith. I will fix my. I will fix my feed. There, my feed is now fixed. Is Shi Huangdi really Lu Bu Wei's son? Probably not. It's not a invention. It's not. How is it a violation of the Geneva Convention? How is the U.S. destroying Hiroshima and Nagasaki a violation of the Geneva Convention? Yeah. So, anyways, other questions about history or social studies. Is the feed any better? I've already, yeah. Look it up. I'm not going to talk about not substantial. Um, Let me see. I'm not reading it to you. Well, then don't come on here and say that I'm wrong. All right. Okay, let's see what else. So, other questions about history or social studies? Okay. Channel about. Well, Brent, this is the friendly neighborhood Let me see. Brent's asking about. This is the friendly neighborhood history channel where we answer questions about history and social studies. Let me see here. Does New Year's have a history? Different times during the year. For instance, for the ancient Celts, Halloween, October 31st, was their New Year's Eve. So based off of the calendars, obviously lunar calendars, you have Tet, Japanese New Year, the Chinese New Year, which usually comes in February. Ramadan and Rosh Hashanah, the not Ramadan, Rosh Hashanah is the new one. Our Rosh Hashanah is the Jewish New Year or Hebrew New Year. So there's New Years in different areas of the world based off of different time periods. 12-month calendars have gone back as far as the ancient Egyptians and Mesopotamians. Or the Egyptians created the 12-month calendar. I believe the Mesopotamians created the 30 days in a month calendar. So based off of that, if you divide the year into 12 months, eventually that cycle is going to continue. So the Mayans, the Egyptians, ancient civilizations had the concept of New Year's. Let me see. Nagasakiites are either extinct or radioactive now. Nagasaki has been rebuilt and is still a huge city in Japan. So is Hiroshima. Can you explain the rise of JFK? What did he accomplish in the Senate before his presidency? Kennedy was good looking, he was outgoing, he had a very moderate perspective on a lot of things, and he kind of embodied a new vision for America. I don't know what he accomplished policy-wise during his time in the Senate, but he was well liked by both sides of the aisle, appealed to a lot of Americans, and was clearly bred to be president. So yeah, great, Brent. I'm glad you're here. How did Venice become such a powerhouse? Venice was willing to trade and work with anyone at any time. Venetian merchants went all around the world. They monopolized. They became the biggest form of sea traders in the Mediterranean. Of course, a Venetian explorer, Marco Polo, for the sake of trade, made it all the way to China. Usages of the Mediterranean, the as well as using the Silk Road, made Venetian merchants some of the most successful in the world. The Venetians were also willing to trade with other entities that were hated by European powers. So they traded with the Ottomans, even after the Ottomans destroyed Constantinople in 1453. So the continual willingness to put their commercial interests ahead of other political or religious or social aims is what made the Venetians so successful. Um, so. Um, Nixon and Kennedy were close. Yes, they were very close. Kennedy was an affable and likable man by a lot of people's standards, which is interesting because Lyndon Johnson, his vice president and successor, was the opposite. Um, yes, he did. Kennedy was an extremely successful president in many ways. You could go to a Chevrolet dealership and buy a brand new Stingray, $200,000 total. Different era. Could the communist system have worked if the Mensheviks had gotten in over Bolsheviks, or if Trotsky had gotten in instead of Stalin? Trotsky's proposal of worldwide global revolution probably would have led to many more civil wars and many more deaths than Stalin caused. That's the harsh reality of it, Tony. But it's an interesting question. What if Trotsky had succeeded over Stalin? I don't know that Trotsky had any less violent impulses than Stalin, any less impulses to power and control. This man had been a Menshevik, had ditched the Mensheviks. What he did to the Potemkin, battleship Potemkin, the sailors who had been some of the earliest revolutionaries and earliest advocates of the revolution, when they refused to cooperate with Moscow's demands, was quite brutal and really. Trotsky doesn't get the reputation, but the way he led the Red Army during the Civil War was through sheer brutality and force of will. He was an extremely indomitable and powerful and strong-willed individual, but also extraordinarily opportunistic and violent. He probably would have been much different than Stalin, and at least the same, if not much, much more violent and destructive. And the romanticization of Trotsky simply because he never had power, I think, is absolute foolishness. As per the Mensheviks and the socialist revolutionaries and the Bolsheviks, as Richard Pipes has said, wanted the same thing. They wanted communist revolution. The Mensheviks believed it could be more gradual. Who knows if that would have harmonized easier with an industrial revolution in Russia that had been more organic. The industrial revolution was slow in Russia. Stalin speeded up the process, and whatever you think of it, the way he did it is pretty cruel. I don't know. I don't know that the Mensheviks would have been any more noble. I think they were more idealistic and less prone to use violence. But if they had gotten into power, they may have done very similar things to the Bolsheviks. Let me see. The United States never signed the Geneva Convention. There wouldn't be a Geneva Convention without the United States. It was last week about that everybody lost their minds about with. There is no international law without those willing to enforce it, which is almost always the United States, Britain, and or some of the other Western countries, and sometimes the Russians and the Chinese. Has no bearing. It has bearing, but it has almost no way of enforcing it without individual international community. The Netherlands, where the Hague is and the ICCC is not going to enforce international law. It just can't. But it can't. There's no police or nationally that does that. Let me see. Other questions about history, social studies? I already answered about JFK. Let me see here. If we have argued Woodrow Wilson Polk, the War of 1812, what else is there to argue about? Think of something. Other questions. Should England government be more applauded for the U.S. Constitution instead of the Founding Fathers? Where did the Founding Fathers get their ideas? Greece, Rome, and the British. The British had a parliamentary some idea of the right to bear arms, by the way, which the Brits today don't really have that. But they also had a unwritten constitution that was kind of morally agreed upon. They had a Bill of Rights. They had a parliamentary system. The thing the Founding Fathers did was they took the Roman idea of the tribune or the consul and removed him from the legislature that had served as the prime minister in Great Britain and created him as his own separate political, and that's because Madison, who wrote most of the Constitution, was heavily influenced by Montesquieu, the French philosopher, Enlightenment philosopher, who believed in a balance of powers and branches of government. Do you believe psychopaths should be given power? No, but I believe they get it anyways. Psychopaths are very good at getting power. They're very likable. They're very attractive. They find a way to be very investable. In fact, getting away from history and into psychology, the truth, a psychopath is probably one of the most charming people you've ever met. Friendly history. You are asking to argue with me. What an honor. Sure. Wasn't there a plan to not allow more than 5 countries to become nuclear powers? What happened? The Soviet Union basically happened. The Cold War happened. Of my revitalization of Burkina Faso. Do what you got to do. Have you researched the battles of Stalingrad during World War? I think it's one of the worst in history. I think 2 million might have died, and from what I remember, women soldiers were shooting the guns. Yes, men were executed for deserting on the Soviet side. People died from freezing to death or starvation. Horrific experience for everybody involved, and the Soviet brutality towards their own people was just as bad as the German brutality towards the Soviets. Such beautiful lips. God. There you go. Here, the Obsidian Persuasion. I don't know what that means. Aztecs rose from nomads to dominance in 150 years. That's true. The Aztecs weren't in power that long before Cortez and the Spanish arrived. Let me see. How do I know all of this? I love what I learn, and I put it to memory. What about Mandela? What do you want to know about Nelson Mandela, the leader of the African National Congress, prison at Canary Island and eventually freed, thanks to the efforts of F.W. Clark, who turned against apartheid, and of course, and wrote the famous memoir, what's it called? Road to Healing? Something like that. Communism is not necessarily working today in China. China does not have a communist. It has a communist government. It doesn't have a communist economy. And yes, Mandela was very much a socialist activist. That's true. Thank you, Jay. You can become a friendly neighborhood historian if you like and subscribe. And if you'd like to join us for our members only live on Monday here on YouTube, then exclusively for members, become a friendly neighborhood historian. For a small fee, you get extra bonus content, early releases, and the chance where we can go into a lot more depth on a lot more topics because there'll be a lot fewer of us, unless everyone becomes a member, which would be fantastic and a Christmas miracle, but no pressure. I don't have the renewed Ebenezer Scrooge to pay for that, but it would be very nice if you did. No pressure, though. And a super chat always helps the channel. CBC is walking America like a dog. Thank you, Chalked. It's great to see that somebody from China is here in the chat. Can you break down the political realignment throughout U.S. history, and do you think there will be a fourth one? A lot of people think that there have been political parties have switched. I don't see that, but I do. But different areas of the country have become more fertile for different political parties at different eras. The Republicans were once the dominant force in New England, and the Democrats had complete control of the South no matter what, almost. Now, the League of Nations was always used to make international law because it didn't have the United States, and it didn't have a West order that basically controlled everything. I'm trying to remember if Canada was in the League of Nations. I guess it was by extension because it was still technically under the British Empire. I know 2 things we agree with. Tell me what you think of these 2. Number 1, Grover Cleveland was not a good president. Grover Cleveland is mid. Theodore Roosevelt is overrated. No, Roosevelt's a great president. I think he's underrated. The more I read about him, the more underrated I think he is. He's so fantastic. Yes. Orion, you can unite them anytime you want. You just don't have to scream it up. Don't scream it, buddy. Hello, Ramo. Why do you think Donald Trump switched from Democrat to Republican? People become more conservative as they get. People, especially in Trump's camp, who were Democrats, want to say that they haven't changed. It's the left that has changed. But they have changed. Trump has changed. Trump was pro-choice. Trump was pro-universal health care. Trump has never been a fan of immigration. Trump has never been than when he's, having relations with international models and then marrying them and then having relations with adult film stars while they're pregnant. But that's neither here nor there. Who cares about morality anymore? The Republicans has been kind of a populist as long as he's been around, and populism for liberal Democrats, now it's a thing for Republicans. So you could say Trump hasn't, but people do change. They do tend to become more conservative generally as they become older. Let me see. Why do you think the Romans were unable to occupy Great Britain? Why is it that the British occupied so much of the earth and controlled so much of the earth? Why Britain's British superior? Well, Abraham Lincoln, that's a great question. You might want to become a member, and we can go into depth. That would be a question that probably take me at least 10 minutes to answer on a members only live. But the truth of the matter is, a simple answer is the Romans were not able to take Scotland and Caledonia because of political infighting. A general named Agricola was very close to doing it in the late 1st century, and then the Emperor Domitian called him back to Rome, probably jealous of Agricola's rising star, and to control the senators who hated him and keep the tenuous Flavian dynasty in power, which fell apart after when he was killed in 96 AD. So the Romans would go into Scotland over and over again. Antoninus Pius tries to do it in the mid 2nd century, but basically they could the ability and the Celts in Scotland to reach and then come back down and attack Roman settlements made it extremely hard for the Romans into Scotland or into Hibernia, which was a separate island. So here's the answer there. Why were the British successful? The British got the Industrial Revolution before everybody else did, so they got a lot of attention and got a little bit got there sooner than everybody else. A little bit of a Trump hater we have here. I don't know. Am I a Trump hater? Am I not a Trump hater? I don't reveal my politics. To some people, I'm too conservative, and to some people, I'm too liberal. You have no idea what I actually think. That's the joy of being an objective historian. I can criticize people based off of off of what I see from history, from basic decency and morality. Let me see. I think they say psychopaths are... Oh, thank you, Tanya. I really appreciate the super chat. Thank you to you, too, and a happy holiday season. As a historian, how do you evaluate January 6th, and will it be a stain on the American history or a sign of vigilante justice? Now, time to confuse you all over again, because I don't... is what it has been cracked up to be. It looked... I lived through it. I thought it was a horrible thing. I have never called it an insurrection. I've called it the Capitol riot. You had a bunch of people... Some people breaking in, some... and acting in horrifyingly inappropriate ways. There's nothing about it that makes us say, oh, that was fantastic. The evidence of FBI informants, the FBI presence there, the pipe bomber, for instance, being not who we expected him to be. What was really I think you have a bunch of there were so many different categories who marched on the Capitol that day that it would take to diagnose it, but from a historical lens, just less than 5 years later, on the one end, I think you have a lot of people who are patriotic, who are supportive of Donald Trump, who believe the election was stolen for whatever reason, whether they believe a lie or not, it doesn't matter. My point is they think that the election was stolen, and so they believe that Congress is certified. Okay, so that's a problem. Then you've got people who believe that they are not going to let that happen, and they're going to save Donald Trump and American democracy, so they're going to storm the Capitol, they're going to get in there somehow and try to prevent them voting on it. Then you have people who are antagonizers, who probably who either worked for leftist organizations or for the FBI in there. And you have nutjob loonies on the right who are basically thinking this is their time to overthrow the government and make Trump their dictator. You have a spectrum of different types of people and categories there, and it's not a unified thing at all. The vast of people who were marching in Washington, D.C. did not go inside. There were protests all over the country about the election. They didn't storm their city halls or anything. It's a horrible, horrible moment in American politics that this was allowed to happen. This happened. It is not Donald Trump's fault. I don't think Trump acted well that day. I don't think he acted well at all throughout that entire. But just because recent history like that is history, I think where will it go down? I don't think it'll go down as an insurrection, as a violation of the 14th Amendment, and all of that stuff. I just don't. But I think that it's a in American history that was able to happen. However, it did happen. Merry Christmas and prosperous New Year from the Philippines. Thank you, Ramel, for joining us from the Philippines. Good to see you. Let me see. I think they say psychopaths are born and they can have a genetics, and sociopaths are made due to toxic environment. I'm not sure if this is correct or not. I'm not a doctor. Yeah. I don't know. There's some socialization. I don't know how much of it is nurture versus nature. I didn't let my politics slip there. Facts aren't hate. That's true. Jesus loves you. Okay. Thank you. What do you think about Jesus? So, I mean, I'm not going to analyze. I don't share my religious views. I keep my personal views to myself. If we ever get to 20,000 subscribers, you get the full detail of who and what I am and what I think about everything. And I will continue to try to do history as objectively as I can from that point onward. But Jesus is the most important figure in history. There's no doubt about it. There's no... Maybe Genghis Khan, maybe Augustus Caesar, maybe Napoleon, maybe Abraham Lincoln. They're all in the conversation too. But the entire Western world is formed by the West's commitment to the worship of this man. You can't have Christianity, the West, without Christianity, and you can't have Christianity. So he's the most important human who's ever lived, if he is only human. The historical Jesus is almost undoubtedly true. There is more evidence for the existence of a first century who was a rabbi who called himself the Jewish Messiah. Almost any other ancient religious or philosophical figure, more so than Socrates. So, but and commits parallel to Alexander the Great and Caesar, who were the powerful of those times. There's that much evidence for Jesus' existence from attestation of outside sources. The writings of the New Testament, while you may question their validity or their truthfulness, are written quite soon after Jesus dies. And of course, the big historical difference is that if you read Tacitus or Josephus, yes, Jesus was this rabbi. He lived. He was killed by Pontius Pilate. And of course, their contention is that he doesn't rise from the dead. The Christians go one step further in saying he rises from the dead, and that is the basis for the Christian religion. So, good question. Exception in the media. There absolutely is. I don't trust the media. I don't like the way the media does things. That's why I do daily news updates here on the Friendly Neighborhood History channel with an objective lens. We now know that you are not a hardcore. Am I? Am I not? I don't know. Do you think that Trump would become friends? Yes. Let me see here. Honestly, I've been stabbed in the back by both Democrats and Republicans. I personally think they both suck, but I don't like my own personal opinion. You're welcome and entitled to have that opinion. People come on here with all sorts of opinions about all sorts. Do you know that Abraham Lincoln was gay? No, Lincoln was not gay. Is there any way the U.S. could have won the Vietnam War? Yes, full-scale military invasion of the North. Damn the causes. Damn the blowback from the Chinese and Russians. That's how they could have won. People who went into the Capitol, especially after the doors were open for them, the 99% of them were just standing there with signs. Which we were told that 95% of protests were nonviolent, then it was a peaceful protest. So by that standard, January 6th was a mostly peaceful protest, which isn't me siding with Matt. It's just showing how much I hate the media because they're deceptive. They said that the riots in Minneapolis were mostly peaceful protests, but the Capitol riot was an insurrection that was the biggest threat to American democracy since the Civil War and was just as horrible as 9/11. This is what the vice president of the new one after that shortly said, which shows total polarization and overblowing of something that was really bad, but not, you've got it, proportionality is what matters these days. Let me see. I don't know what you're saying that. All the paid, well, thank you, Carpe Diem, for saying that. When you shout it using all caps, it's harder to understand. Were invited, and I've seen clips of both. I've seen people rushing, and I've seen people pushing. I've seen people shoving. Obviously, Ashley Babbitt died, and I've seen people being welcomed in and just wandering around like a bunch of aimless fools, which they were. Yeah. You said it wasn't an insurrection, but they tried to change the electoral count by force. I beg to disagree with you. They wanted to overturn the election results, but they didn't get that far. They didn't try to overthrow the government, which is what an insurrection tries to do. They were trying to stop a vote on an election that they believed was stolen. In their minds, and in the minds of Donald Trump and his followers, the insurrection had happened in November, not on January 6th. Yeah, it's not a good thing by any stretch. I don't know any MAGA person who, that was great. Wasn't January 6th just amazing? They don't celebrate it. Except Trump, who calls it a day of love, because God didn't help us. What do you social studies user? But it's great to have you here, and people have been asking about January 6th and recent American political history. Let's see. There is a video of Nick Fuentes encouraging people to storm the Capitol. He was arrested and informant fed. He's either an informant fed or he's just an annoying troll. The less time I think about him, the better off. You're the loser that has a membership to a guy with 20 viewers. Actually, we're more like at 3 million views in the last just less than 2 years. 10,000 and a half subscribers. You know, you can become one of them, Liability. We would be happy to. in history, some of the most ardent skeptics become the truest believers. Is Palestine that part of the land that Israeli soldiers missed to conquer, as the Bible says they didn't quite finish the job? I don't know what you mean, Dave. So anyways, what do you think the 61 Nuremberg Sky incident was? Not sure. Palestine exists as far back as the 2nd century AD when the Romans renamed Judea. Is there an aspect of pigment religion incorporating Christianity by the Western leadership to bring about unity? They tried to. They certainly tried to make Christianity a racist. So, as a historian, should people inflate a president's greatness if they were to get it back to good conditions? If yes, please explain. Presidents are judged on what they do during and after their presidencies. And if a president really makes a change and gets things going again when they were struggling before, he usually should get the credit for that. If a home door is open and you go robbery, well, it's not robbery. You haven't taken anything yet. Media needs to be held accountable. Yes, they do, which is why I do daily news updates. I've heard different things about how Panama was formed. Is it fully U.S. created, like people say? The U.S. influenced the revolution in Panama government so that we could build the Panama Canal. The French had tried to do this and had failed several times. Is J.D. Vance Mossad and or CIA in reference to Peter informant? Yeah, Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance, they're all Israelis. Yes, that's clearly Israelis. No. More proof of Israel and Jesus Christ and Moses for fake accounts, and no one has proof of the claims. I don't know what you're saying there. It is interesting that it's hard to prove the existence of Muhammad. I'm not saying he didn't exist, but I'm saying it's hard to prove his existence. If you know history, you'd know the right infiltrated BLM and did the majority of the violence. I'm sure that happened. I'm not saying it didn't happen, except that I don't know much about that. There were agitators in BLM. There are agitators in every protest movement, and some of them are on the right and some of them are on the left. So, which right-wing group are you talking about? Who would you vote for in the 1968 election? Eugene McCarthy. I don't share my politics often, but I'd vote for Eugene McCarthy 57. This idea of getting people straight and clean and ending the war was probably not winnable at that point. He was the only to say it, and he basically seemed to be running for president because he cared about it, not because of his politics. It wouldn't be because he was a Democrat necessarily that I would vote for him. Or is it? I don't know. To see you. If it came to, I should do a video where I say who I would vote for in every presidential election. If it came to about me being a young man, maybe I'm a Vietnam vet, maybe I'm coming home from the war. How old am I? You have no idea. Maybe I'm a little too old for the draft, or maybe, I don't know. But I'd probably think the war isn't going right and needs to end, and I would pin the war on Johnson and Hubert Humphrey, so I'd probably vote for Nixon. Probably. Let me see here. Yeshua said to donate to Israel, love Israel or suffer. The Bible said to donate to Israel, so yes, do something because religion, that's never led to problems. He was a stingy tipper. Well, I believe it. I sent my MAGA son-in-law letter with a Democrat seal on it saying that $1,000 was donated to them in his name. He had such a fit. That's hilarious. I love that. My grandma is a big fan of your streams. Well, your grandmother has great taste. What are your metrics to classify a president? Transformational, the ability, America before and after, their impact on presidential legacy, their personality, their political savvy, the peace and stability of America during their presidency, their ability to guide the nation through war. That's why Lincoln's at the top for me. Let me see. Lincoln was definitely gay. You really think he was hitting that dog, Mary? Ugh. Enough to have 4 children. Disgusting. Cochino. Yes, Israel asked for our money right after they crucified the Messiah. Bro's straight propaganda saying Jesus was real, but Muhammad wasn't. I didn't say Muhammad wasn't real. I never said Muhammad wasn't real. I'm saying that there is more evidence to substantiate the existence of Jesus of Nazareth from outside secular sources than there are to perpetuate the existence of Muhammad. And by the way, it was the Christians who were the first ones to write about Muhammad from outside sources. Muslims who make arguments in favor of their historicity almost always have to use Muslim sources or may or may not be referring to an Arabic warlord who may or may not be Muhammad, but is certainly Muhammad, because it has to be Muhammad. Does friendly history exist? Yes, of course it does. How do you rate President Nixon as a president? A B tier president till he gets to Watergate, and an F tier president when Watergate happens. Let me see. I don't know what you mean, the general election. Proud Boys and Boogaloo Boys, who set the precinct on fire, as well as many other public info. They were even arrested. That's why they demanded peaceful protest. January 6th was not peaceful. No, the protests in Minneapolis were not peaceful, and neither was January 6th. I'm saying that standard is unfairly used by the media to one is an insurrection, one is a peaceful protest. That's not fair by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not surprised that the Proud Boys did that. They're insane. No one ever talked about Australia. Do you have anything to say about it? Australia is basically worried about an overpopulation of emus in their civilization in the early 1930s. In 1932, they went to war to basically kill off the emus, and human rights, animal rights protests and things like that, and basically never having their heart into it made them surrender a couple months later. Yeah, it's funny. Why does Donald Trump have 34 felonies? Most of them are related to the hush money case with you wouldn't vote for Walz. No. Definitely not voting for a racist like George Walz. What do you think both Republicans and Democrats should know about the other? Oh boy, that's years. What you should know is the history of both the Republicans and the Democrats. And if Hars could put that video in the chat, you could go watch it. But I've actually talked about where the symbols and the parties originated from. And the Republicans and their founding in the 1850s, and the Democrats under Andrew Jackson 20s. Right now, I'm tempted to say give a super chat, but I'll, just for the sake of what you're asking, Charles, I think the Republicans should realize that the Democrats help people, and the Democrats should realize that the Republicans want to protect the country. If just classic neoliberal, neoconservative debate. Republicans should realize the humanity of immigrants. Should realize the importance of laws, and that's, or at least that's what the parties are saying. Yeah, I don't know that he was taken down by the mic. There are many documents showing that agitators are mostly law enforcement and intelligence agents during MLK, Malcolm X, up to today, like January 6th. Could be. Sometimes happens. I'm not saying it's impossible. Bill Clinton lowered the national debt to zero, giving us a $3 billion surplus, the greatest deflation in history. That's not true, but Clinton was extremely successful in cutting the deficit and balancing the budget, something that no American president has done before, and very few had done previous. Do you think Trump would have beaten Obama if somehow Obama was able to run for a third term? No, Obama is too transformational, too popular, and too steady of a person to fall for Trump's antics. Was Theodore Roosevelt the first president to officially make America the global authority? You mentioned peace and tranquility without war. How would the U.S. be a number one? They were on their way to becoming a power. They were already one of the biggest producers and manufacturers. And the McKinley presidency had given them international colonies and prestige. It also interfered in China and how to deal with China. But Roosevelt definitely put America on the map without really going to war, but by mediating into the war and showing the U.S.'s ability to get involved in other affairs, like in Panama. Roosevelt, I think, puts the United States on that level of a geopower. And I think Woodrow Wilson kind of finishes that after the Great War by basically solidifying America as the predominant power in the world that hasn't been devastated by the losses and tragedies of World War II, what you call World War I. Yeah. It was gay. It was kind of gesture. Yeah, it was common for men to share. It was common in Europe in the Middle Ages for men to hold hands and kiss on the lips, like manly men, like Richard the Lionheart. Let me see here. Yeah, why can't people stick with history? Or Spice Girl. I don't have one. Simply false. More records exist for Muhammad's close companions, like the Umrah letters, who interacted with him, than for Jesus' immediate followers. Not true. Simply not true. Almost all of the documents are written about close relationships with Muhammad are written centuries after his death. Even the most conservative of Islamic sources agree with that. There is no Quran that is extant that Muhammad wrote. I'm not saying he didn't exist. I'm saying the evidence existence is shaky. Given that he's 600 years after Jesus, that's even more shaky. The Christians are actually some of the earliest ones to document his existence. It's not Western lies. It's easily, you're probably a Muslim, or you might be a Muslim, and tend to think that every single one of their sources was written immediately right afterwards. That's not true. Not even Islamic scholarship, but most of the writings about the life of Muhammad are written much later. Mansa Musa was a leader, but what were some of his accomplishments? He basically made the Was it Ghana? Was it called Ghana at that time? No, Mali. He made the Mali Empire the richest in Africa by trading consistently with the Muslims, ties between the Arabic kingdoms and the Islamic Caliphate, and with the Mali Empire. He built up a huge amount of wealth. Timbuktu, probably the center of cosmopolitan trade in the world, and wealth than anyone else. Probably the richest man who has ever lived, Tanya. How do you evaluate President Jefferson Davis? Failed. Failed as an American politician, and then failed as the leader of a confederacy. I mean, I'm sure there's more to him than that, but you look at it and you look at the Confederacy, and they failed. Their job was to get the Union to stop attacking them. They couldn't do it. I think Walz wants to help people by stealing from people. You mean Tim Walz, the governor, former vice presidential candidate? I'm not going to get into the politics of that Somali. I talked enough about politics for January 6th. Was Mel Gibson good or bad for history? Movies are pretty impressive. They're not extremely accurate, but they're good movies. His personal views, more problems there. Thank you for joining us on this great channel, Noah. Raven is asking, who oldest president that we have a voice recording of? Oh, Benjamin Harris. Might be Theodore Roosevelt. I live in Delaware right now, Old Newcastle, and we have so much history there. Also a history about the Lepi Indians, and William Penn is all there. I love how William Penn treated the Native Americans, was very open to them, very much wanted them integrated into society, wanted to respect their customs. Let me see. So, the exploding whale incident in 1970. Have we as a country really learned our lesson from that? I don't learn that lesson. E-Dog, great to see you. Did Greek people in the classical timeline practice babies? Well, circumcising males. I don't know. I don't think so. So something that's predominantly Jewish, and then later the Christian did. I don't think they did. Also, if a violence happens, that's a peaceful protest, as the actual protesters aren't violent. January 6th was people themselves doing violence. It's bad faith, bro. Not if there were FBI agitators there. You're not listening. You're not. I think you're having a hard time, as Trump might say. You're not a Muslim. Well, I appreciate you willing to defend an indefensible position then, and not blaming it on your religion. What was the nature of Alexander's relationship with Hephaestion? You're gonna have to remind me who Hephaestion was. Bill Clinton left office with a budget surplus. That's true. Why are you gay? Who says I'm gay? Didn't Andrew Jackson clear the national debt? Sold off government land to do it. Thomas Jefferson did the same thing. Sugar influenced history more than religion. Cash crop, a lucrative and delicious commodity? Yeah. More than religion? No. Let me see. What do you struggle? That's true. He did break into Social Security. What do you struggle accepting about the world humanity most? That if we would just realize that the message of history is simple, that we are the same no matter what, that we continue to struggle with these same patterns, we could recognize pattern behavior, and then find ways to improve our behavior and the way we interact with each other by just saying, hey, 1,000 years ago acted very similar to us. They had very different modes of technology and beliefs, but they're very similar to us. But we refuse to do that. The failure of humans to recognize self-consciously through history, the self-conscious position we are in, is sad. If we were more self-conscious about history, we would realize this. Let me see. After all of our discussions about Woodrow Wilson, how much have I changed your mind about him? A little bit. Their job was also to preserve slavery. Whose job? Early non-Muslim accounts making his historical presence well documented through much of the story is compiled later by followers similar to Jesus with a stronger framework of testimonies. No, it's not a stronger framework. There are a few sources that attest to him, including his followers, and they are written about centuries later. The latest writings of the New Testament probably are between the 100 and 150, which is a century after Jesus lived. It's not true. I'm sorry, it's just not. Who are these sources? Who are you referring to? Yura is one. You also have the caliphs who reference back to Muhammad. We don't even know what the Quran says because one of the caliphs destroyed all the other copies. It's just not true. No, it's actually true. The FBI agitators part is true. I'm not saying that it was all of January 6th. I've said there's a spectrum of people. You still aren't listening to me. Trump derangement syndrome has disrupted this history time. You guys just can't think of anything else. People are allowed to think whatever they want. Should Lincoln be praised as and it's good to see you. Should Lincoln be praised as the one to abolish slavery or the state slavery before the 1800s? Oh, everyone in the abolitionist movement deserves credit for slavery, but Lincoln is the predominant force who got rid of slavery. Let me see here. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes a lot. Um, Muhammad was a false prophet. Islam is based on hate and control. Well, come on. It's not really fair, is it? Claims that the FBI orchestrated or incited the January 6th, 2020 attack on the Capitol have been definitively debunked by independent multiple-year investigations. It's nice that you've quoted from Google AI, but that's not true. There's actually a decent amount of evidence and testimony of FBI agitators being there, of people in FBI uniforms, of working with the FBI in that conglomerate. I'm not saying all of them. I'm saying some of them. And Nick Fuentes may very well have been one of them. Have a safe New Year's to you too, user Boo. Boo, whatever. It's just a bunch of. It's a license plate ending. Um, Hephaestion was Alexander's second confidant, but some scholars argue their relationship was romantic and compared it to Achilles with Patroclus. Patroclus and it. Okay, we got interrupted. Um, Patroclus and Achilles were cousins. They may have been lovers. I don't know about that. I don't even know that those men existed. I wouldn't be surprised if Alexander had a romantic relationship with Hephaestion. It's funny that Hephaestion disappears from the pages as not part of the Diadoche that divides his empire. Why do you think schools teach limited history and is biased? They have an agenda, but they also have limited amounts of time in which to teach, and so they focus on the old history. People explain what history is rather than what history does. Bikini Atoll. That's where the French tested their first nuclear weapons and became the inspiration for the bikini. Um, People never change. True. All we need is love. Oh boy, this guy's just saying lie after lie, then gaslights. I'm not gaslighting anyone. Can you repeat the last 10-minute lecture? Thanks. No, I cannot do that. Literally just telling lies. Be careful, chat. This is propaganda under the guise of history. Yes, clearly it's propaganda under the guise of history. That's when the debate is over, the loser resorts to ad hominem. That's what it was either Socrates or Plato that said it. Actually, it's not that people never change; it's that behavior is conditioned by circumstances of broader society. No, broader societies don't change because people don't change. Human nature is malleable on the edges, but at the core is the same. Um, let me see here. You look like you're from Glee. I hope that's a compliment. What is the accurate? Yes, from what I understand. Um, get a whiteboard. Oh, that'd be fun. But I have this nice, wonderful Christmas Carol background, and you can listen to me read the Christmas Carol and other holiday classics here on the channel. There's no evidence that Achilles had any such relationship with Patroclus. In fact, it did make a big deal out of Achilles and the Trojan women Agamemnon stole from him. That's true. Achilles was very interested in a Trojan woman, and very much hated Agamemnon. No history does not repeat. When was the last time you saw dinosaurs? That's funny. It's not what that means, but okay. It's that people act in similar ways and similar results happen. Didn't the United States investigate a revolution in Panama to get control of the Panama Canal? Yep. Yes, they did, Rick Young. What do you know about the War of the Worlds radio broadcast? Made H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, read in 1938, bought in New York and New Jersey. This a young Orson Welles makes him famous, but terrifies people. Some people actually believe an alien invasion is happening. Besides, Nancy Pelosi is on TV. What? Nah, bro, you literally deny facts. The argument ended with you repeatedly. I didn't deny anything. How much meth have you done today? Not enough. Not enough to handle Chalk's nonsense. That was the last known dinosaur. Dang, that's crazy. Um, Let me see. Okay, I've got up to the chat. Do you know about and are willing to yap about the history of modern Christmas? Modern Christmas, again, is kind of a derivative of Germanic influences in Great Britain that are popularized with traditions from Albert, the prince consort to Queen Victoria, who from his native Germany in the 1840s. Of course, you have Dickens, who really gives us a modern form of Christmas and kind of popularizes the tradition with the Christmas Carol as a time of redemption and renewal. And Thomas Nast, a German immigrant in the United States, takes the German idea of St. Nicholas and puts him in a red suit carrying a bag of toys. And this is then up by Coca-Cola, who gives us from there, velour spreads into Mrs. Claus, the North Pole, the elves, elf, reindeer, stuff like that. Love fixes everything. When did the thought that people in the Middle Ages were dirty and smelled bad start, and why do people still believe? There was less centralization of water and sanitation as there had been in the Roman time and is in our time. People basically believe the Roman era was clean and that one was not. These are oversimplifications. Let me see here. Was Jack the Ripper real? Yes, we just don't know who he was. That Coca-Cola ad is indeed legendary. Yep. Cocaine in that. Where else? Any other questions about history or social studies? Okay. Um, People say mean stuff all the time. Thanks for taking the time and thoughtful answer. Only knew of Dickens and Coca-Cola influences. Well, I appreciate that, Mantha. Mantha? I don't know. I'm saying that. Go and listen to me read the Christmas. Thank you, Juniper, for reminding everybody. People do get kind of nasty here sometimes, and I'll answer it in the light matching their nastiness. So, anyways, I'm going to sign off. I hope everybody has a really great rest of your weekend, or in the rest of your evening. Hopefully, you'll be joining us as the weekend continues. Our holiday weekend continues with our Sunday live stream lecture at 4 p.m. Eastern tomorrow about the fifth president of the United States, James Monroe. And Shocked, it was good to have you here. Please, please substantiate some of your claims. I would really like to see them on paper. I hope everybody has a really great rest of your evening. If you're going to go out and party, or maybe you'll meet the love of your life at a bar and you use some of the information to impress her or him. And maybe that'd be fun. Yes, you cited, no, you didn't cite two site sources next time. Yes, and I appreciate everybody for joining us. Please like and subscribe when yes, you're just propagandists. Yes, and ad hominems mean you lost the debate. But anyways, please like, subscribe. We'll see you again next time, and then tomorrow. And if you want to become a member and join our members only live on Monday, that would be fantastic. I really and yes, whatever, Tom. Hope you got. Sorry about the internet. Let me see. I will see you all tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern. Take care, and as always, love history. Bye bye now.